Nasser, everybody we spoke to yesterday very unhappy about the Ahmedabad pitch. Joe Root himself said that if he could take 5 for 8, that should tell you everything you need to know. Do you think it was good enough for Test cricket?
It was a poor pitch. In fact, the last 2 Test pitches have been poor. In the old days, as a captain, you have to mark the umpires, you have to mark the pitches. And I would have personally marked both pitches as poor. But the previous one, India got 600 runs on it, and Rohit Sharma got 160, and Ravi Ashwin got 100. This one was actually even harder, I'd say. It was a tougher one because not every ball turned. It was the odd one turned, and then the odd one, because of the pink ball, skidded on, which made it much, much harder for batting. I think the ICC regulations are excessive spin on day one, and I think it pushed those regulations, but I'm not sure it was excessive spin on day one. Most of the batsmen were getting out from balls that didn't turn, but obviously in the back of their mind, they were thinking about the one that did.
OK, so if it wasn't excessive spin on day one, then there'll be no need for the ICC to take action?
I think they need to look at it because however compelling the last 2 games have been, you don't want every single Test match to be like this, to be a 2-day test. And Joe Root's absolutely spot on. If he's getting 5 for 8 on it, then the ICC, they need to see what the umpires mark it as and see if it breaks those regulations that they've set in place. There's no point having those regulations. But as I say, it says in the regulations, excessive spin on day one. And on this pitch, I didn't see excessive spin on day one. I saw the odd one. England were, if I was England, I'd concentrate more on where they lost this game. Having won an important toss, they found themselves 73 for 2 on day one on a pitch that they knew was going to get worse, and they were bowled out for 112. That was where the game was lost. Everything else is just noise.
Yeah, we've heard from Kevin Peterson that the key point here is the batting of England. The pitch can't explain England being bowled out for 112 and 81, can it?
Well, it can in a combination of the 2 pitches because as a batsman, it gets to you mentally and you lose your rhythm. If you look at someone like Ollie Pope, who's a naturally gifted rhythm player, he's a little bit like Ian Bell, he's been compared to Ian Bell. By the end of the second innings yesterday, he was jumping around against Ashwin because that's what poor pitches do to you. You lose all kind of confidence in the rhythm of your batting. England, in fact, had not only just had problems with Axar Patel. If you go back to Sri Lanka, they had problems with the left-arm spinner Vambuldiniya, the Sri Lankan left-arm spinner. So there is not only a pattern developing against left-arm spin, but also the mode of dismissal against left-arm spin. A lot of them were playing for the spin, and it was skidding on with the pink ball and getting them out LBW and bowled. So that's what they need to focus on in between tests, is how they're going to play Axar Patel. I personally would play for the ball that skids on, and if it turns big and goes past the edge, then you just say, well bowled.
All right, and England went into the match with just 1 frontline spinner. India, of course, had 3. Should England have selected Dom Bess?
It was probably the hardest selection for England because obviously it's a day-night test, pink ball. England played to their strengths, which was Broad, Archer and Anderson. If I was Dom Bess and you're showing him here, I would be really concerned if I'm not playing on that Ahmedabad pitch. If it is spinning so big and Joe Root's getting 5 for 8, I would be concerned. Now, Joe Root said when he left him out after the first test, he needs to go away and work at his game. There should have been alarm bells ringing then. Basically, what he was saying is that he's not giving his captain enough control. There were full tosses, too many full tosses for a finger spinner. And you could argue Joe Root has got more control of his off-spin than Dom Bess at the moment. But, you know, it's not just the best thing. This is a thing for English cricket. If you turn up on a dust bowl in Ahmedabad and you're not picking your second spinner, that really should send alarm bells ringing through English cricket as to why that's happening.
Yeah, what a difference a couple of weeks or so makes. Now, look, defeats in the second and third tests will pour even more scrutiny on the rotation policy that we've discussed plenty. Should winning in India not have been one of their main priorities for the year?
I've been consistent with this throughout. I have no problems with rotation. The problem is not with the selectors. The problem is not with the England players. The problem is with 17 test matches in a year, 2 IPLs, a World T20 and an Ashes series. and a global pandemic, which means the players have to be in a bubble and in quarantine everywhere they go. That cannot be good for anyone, let alone an England cricketer. So I agree with rotation, but I also agree with your point. It's when you rotate. Golfers will get their games set up for the major tournaments of the year. They'll look at their schedule and say, right, the Masters is here. I'm going to make sure I'm ready for that first day of the Masters. This would have been a major for me. England, India in a test match series is a major. I wouldn't have rotated now. I would have rotated 50-over cricket. There's no 50-over World Cup. I'd have said to Bairstow, Root, Stokes, the Butler, the 4 format players, have a rest then. But I think we have to give a bit of sympathy this year to selectors and realise that rotation is necessary. We need to look after our players this year.
Last one, Nasser. What changes would you make for the final test?
Good question. I would not play. If it's the same pitch, and you can imagine India might well play on the same pitch, I wouldn't play 4 seamers. I'd leave out one out of Broad and Anderson. I'd play Stokes as your 3rd seamer. And I'd probably have to get Best back in, unless they're telling us that Dom Best has got the yips and he literally can't land it. Dom Best, your 2nd spinner, needs to be playing on pitches like this. If they don't think Best is ready or good enough, then Root can play the 2nd spinner, and I would play the extra batsman Lawrence, because in low-scoring games, your batting's going to be vital.